Let me tell you something. A man never values what he has when it's right in front of him, not the way he should. Familiarity makes us take things for granted. It's not until something is gone that we feel its weight. And that's why men come back after no contact. See, when you pull away, when you go silent, something shifts. That presence he got used to, that reassurance he depended on, it's no longer there. And now he's left with something he didn't expect: emptiness, questions, doubt. And doubt, it's a powerful thing. Because when a man starts questioning, he starts remembering. He remembers the way you laughed, the way you made him feel, the way you were there when no one else was. And in that silence, you become something rare, something he realizes he might not find again. But listen closely. Just because a man comes back doesn't mean he's changed. It doesn't mean he's ready. Some men come back out of love. Others come back out of ego. Some return because they miss you. Others return because they miss the control. Absence creates value because human nature is wired to overlook what is always present and available. When something or someone is consistently within reach, the mind begins to normalize their presence, making them seem less significant over time. This is not intentional. It is simply how people adapt to what they believe will always be there. The moment that presence is removed, however, a shift occurs. What was once taken for granted is now noticed in its absence. The comfort that was once expected is now questioned, and the security that was once assumed is now uncertain. This is where value is created. Not in presence, but in the sudden loss of what was once familiar. When a person steps away, they allow space for reflection to take place. In that space, memories surface, emotions resurface, and perspectives begin to change. Distance forces a person to reassess what they once had, and in doing so, they often come to realize the depth of what they lost. They remember the laughter, the warmth, the reliability, the energy that was once a constant in their life. What they failed to appreciate in the moment now becomes something they long for, and longing creates desire. The mind works in contrast. It appreciates warmth after experiencing cold, values light after being surrounded by darkness, and understands the worth of something once it is no longer accessible. This is why absence is so powerful. It is in missing someone that people begin to understand their true importance. It is in separation that they begin to grasp what they had. And often, it is too late. Absence has a way of resetting perceptions. It removes the distractions, the noise, and the taken for granted moments, allowing only the core essence of the relationship to remain. When that essence is strong, when what was shared had depth and meaning, absence magnifies its value. The more time that passes, the more a person begins to see the void left behind, and the more they realize that what they lost may not be so easily replaced. But absence does not just create value for the one left behind. It also creates value for the one who chose to walk away. It grants perspective, clarity, and an opportunity to reclaim power. It proves that they are not defined by someone else's presence or validation. It teaches that the most valuable people in life are the ones who recognize worth without needing distance to remind them. And the ones who fail to see that, they are the ones who will always come back, only to find that the absence that once created value has now built strength instead. The power of uncertainty lies in its ability to disrupt complacency and force introspection. When something is predictable, when it is always available, the mind categorizes it as secure, as unchanging, as something that requires no extra effort to maintain. But the moment uncertainty enters the equation, everything shifts. What was once assumed to be constant is now questioned. What was once taken for granted is now analyzed. Uncertainty creates a gap between comfort and desire. And in that gap, the mind begins to work in ways it never did before. It starts to reflect, to reassess, to wonder. It starts to crave answers where none exist. People often seek certainty because it gives them a sense of control. It reassures them, makes them feel safe, and provides them with the illusion that they understand the situation, the outcome, the future. But when certainty is stripped away, when a person who was always available suddenly isn't, when communication that was once predictable suddenly stops, a shift takes place. The lack of answers creates a mental loop that replays the past, searching for clues, for reasons, for explanations. The same mind that once overlooked begins to overanalyze. The same heart that once felt secure now feels restless. And that restlessness is where value is often rediscovered. Uncertainty forces a person to confront what they never questioned before. It forces them to consider possibilities they never entertained. It forces them to imagine outcomes they never prepared for. And the longer uncertainty lingers, the more intense the mental and emotional response becomes. It creates a sense of urgency where there was once indifference. It creates a need to act, to understand, to reconnect. And that need is powerful because it often drives a person to appreciate what they once neglected. The mind does not like unresolved questions. It does not like loose ends, unfinished stories, or doors left slightly open. It seeks closure, but when that closure is denied, it lingers. It replays moments, revisits memories, and romanticizes what it no longer has access to. This is the power of uncertainty. It turns something familiar into something mysterious, something predictable into something elusive. And in that elusiveness, desire is reignited. But uncertainty is not just a tool that affects others, it is also a tool that empowers. The one who embraces uncertainty, the one who understands its effect, holds the power in any dynamic. They are the ones who dictate the pace, who create the distance, who shift the balance. They are the ones who know that certainty breeds comfort, but uncertainty breeds value. They are the ones who walk away, not because they lack feelings, but because they understand that their presence should never be taken as a given. They know that to be truly valued, they must first be missed, and to be missed, they must first become uncertain. Growth is magnetic because it transforms the way a person carries themselves, the way they think, and the way they move through the world. It is not just about improvement, it is about evolution. When someone grows, they step into a higher version of themselves, and that change is felt by everyone around them. It is not spoken, not announced, it is sensed. There is an undeniable energy that radiates from someone who is leveling up, and that energy attracts attention, admiration, and often the very people who once overlooked them. The reason growth is so powerful is because it creates contrast. A person who has grown is no longer who they used to be, and that contrast forces others to take notice. The way they speak is different. The way they carry themselves is different. The way they respond, the way they react, the way they prioritize. Everything has shifted. And that shift is magnetic because it is rare. Most people remain the same, stuck in cycles, repeating the same behaviors, thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices. But when someone breaks free from that, when they choose growth over stagnation, they stand out. They become something people gravitate toward. Growth demands discipline. It requires sacrifice. It means shedding old habits, old mindsets, and sometimes old relationships. It is uncomfortable, it is challenging, but it is necessary. And the moment a person embraces growth, they start moving differently. They stop chasing what no longer serves them. They stop seeking validation from people who never valued them. They stop lowering themselves to fit into spaces that were never meant for them. And that change, that newfound self-respect, is powerful. It is the reason people start paying attention. Ego versus emotion is the battle that determines how people act, react, and make decisions in relationships, in success, and in life. The ego is a protector, a shield, a defense mechanism built to maintain power, pride, and control. Emotion, on the other hand, is raw, vulnerable, and deeply human. The ego is calculated, emotion is impulsive. The ego seeks dominance, emotion seeks connection. The ego fears loss, emotion seeks connection. The ego fears loss, emotion seeks connection. The ego fears dominance, emotion seeks connection. The ego fears loss, 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 and when these two forces collide, the outcome depends on which one is in control. The ego does not want to admit weakness. It does not want to acknowledge pain, loss, or mistakes. It would rather walk away than apologize. It would rather suffer in silence than express vulnerability. It would rather pretend it does not care than admit it does. The ego craves validation, but it refuses to seek it openly. It desires power, but it refuses to show need. It wants attention, but it refuses to ask for it. And that is why so many people lose what they love, because their ego convinces them that proving a point is more important than preserving a connection. Emotion, however, does not operate in logic. It does not care about power struggles or control. It does not measure who reached out first, who cared less, who had the upper hand. Emotion feels what it feels, and it expresses itself without calculation. Emotion drives people to reach out, to reconcile, to admit when they are wrong, to fight for what matters. Emotion seeks to heal, to understand, to connect. But when the ego steps in, it silences emotion. It turns love into a battlefield. It turns relationships into competitions. It turns genuine moments into power struggles. And the more the ego takes over, the more disconnected a person becomes from what truly matters. They test the door because human nature is built on curiosity, on the need to know what is still accessible, what is still open, what is still waiting on the other side. People do not always appreciate what they have when it is in front of them, but the moment it is gone, the moment they feel distance, the moment they sense change, their instincts drive them to check if the opportunity still exists. They do not always return because they miss what they lost. Sometimes they return because they need to know if they still have access. When a door has been left open for too long, it is assumed to always be open. If someone has always answered, always been available, always been waiting, the assumption is that they always will be. But when silence replaces expectation, when absence replaces familiarity, when the door that was once wide open begins to close, people begin to notice. They begin to wonder. They begin to feel the pull of the unknown. They test the door not because they are ready to walk through it, but because they need to see if it will still move at their touch. Testing the door is not always about love, about regret, about genuine realization. Sometimes it is about ego. It is about reassurance. It is about making sure they have not lost something they assumed they could always return to. Because certainty is comfortable, but uncertainty is unsettling. And when a person realizes that the certainty they once had is fading, they seek to restore it, even if they have no real intention of staying. They knock, they text, they reach out in small ways, not to fully come back, but to make sure the option still exists. They do not want to walk through the door. They just do not want it to be locked. But doors are not meant to stay open forever. Access is a privilege, not a guarantee. And the moment someone realizes they are only being checked on, only being tested, only being used as an emotional safety net, that is the moment they must decide whether they will continue to leave the door open or whether they will close it for good. Because when a door remains open too long without being valued, it stops being a door and starts being a revolving entrance, one where people come and go as they please, never truly staying, never fully appreciating. They test the door because they want to know if they still have control, if they still matter, if they can still step back in whenever they choose. But the real power lies with the one who decides whether or not the door remains open. The one who understands that value is not proven through presence, but through action. The one who knows that when a door is closed with certainty, the right ones will knock with purpose, and the wrong ones will walk away, just as they were always meant to. But listen closely. Just because a man comes back doesn't mean he's changed. It doesn't mean he's ready. Some men come back out of love. Others come back out of ego. Some return because they miss you. Others return because they miss the control. So when he returns, ask yourself, is he here for you or for himself? Because a man who truly values you won't just return, he'll show up different. He won't just knock, he'll come with a key. Ready to build, ready to stay. Your power is not in whether he comes back. Your power is in knowing you get to decide what happens next. So don't just let him return. Make sure he rises. Make sure he's worthy. Because the real flex, it's not getting him back. It's knowing you never needed him to begin with. Now tell me, when that door swings open, are you letting him walk in or are you walking past?